We're going to compare Grokipedia's article on beans, Wikipedia's article on beans. I'll give you the truth, no spin zone. We're going to talk about the dynamic life system coming to GTA 6. That means characters will live full-on lives when you're not around. They might remember you, they might go get new jobs, and then move their way up the ranks and still remember what you did to them when you first met. It is going to be crazy. Unitree G1 humanoid robot can yank a car out of a car parking spot. I'm not sure how this changes the world, but it does somehow. Get ready for movies made from scratch that are long form. We're gonna look at Holo-Cine. This is a generative cinematic multi-shot long-form video narrative system. Turns out large language models often do get addicted to gambling, just like people. Possible artificial intelligence will detect what species are about to go extinct before they do, which might help us actually save them. Anthropic's adding support for geometric interpretability, meaning we can get a little bit closer now to knowing why large language models respond the way that they do. Very important for alignment. There's some new research that looks at the different large language models and their personalities. Turns out Claude favors ethics, OpenAI efficiency, Gemini connection, and Grok risk-taking. Pick your colleague or poison, depending on how you look at it. Scientists now know more about the brain signals in our brain and why that means some people hear voices in their head that aren't there. Some researchers are saying that the AI models might be developing their own, survival drive. Like 2001: A Space Odyssey. Not exactly like that, but like that. To eventually control the stock market, OpenAI needs to figure out the right data sources to train their model on, so they're hiring a whole bunch of bankers who create data so that they can have sample data for it to learn from. Biotechnologists have given a shot to elderly mice. Turns out their skin looks way better afterwards, and it could do the same for other organs too, paving the way for protective immune cells that could be coming to humans soon. A university professor who busted a bunch of students for using ChatGPT busted them again when he found out that they were using it for their apology letters. Yikes. Albania's prime minister said that the AI that they're using in the government is now, quote, pregnant with 83 babies. I guess each of those AI babies will also be an assistant, but I don't know if you need to say that they're pregnant. You can just say I'm rolling out 85 new agents to help with the government, I think. And I'm going to show you some secret geometry hidden inside of a wave. Before we get in depth with all of these articles, do you mind hitting that hype button on YouTube? So if you're on the mobile device, you can swipe right on the comments and you'll see a special button called hype. If this video is less than 7 days since it was published, and because my channel is less than 400,000 subscribers, and you have one of your 3 hypes left for the week, please hit that button. That's one of the best ways to help a smaller channel like mine get found. It's the main thing I'm focusing on right now, hoping to grow. One day, I want to get to 100,000 subscribers. I want to get one of those, the little plaques would be so cool in the background, but takes a lot of work, and every little bit helps. So if you don't mind, all right, let's get back to it. All right, by now I'm sure you've heard of Grokipedia. This is it. Is it bias? Is Wikipedia bias? It all depends on which side of the fence you want to be on, but we are going to compare the article on beans on both Wikipedia and Grokipedia as judged by ChatGPT. All right, now first up, I put a poll on my YouTube channel. I got a lot of votes, especially for a channel my size. 374 of you voted in this poll. I asked you, which source for facts do you trust more? Grokipedia or Wikipedia? Humans versus LLM. For now, the humans still have the lead. 68% of you said you trust facts from Wikipedia more than Grokipedia. But now let's go over to ChatGPT and ask a similar question. I'm going to give you 2 different articles on beans. I want you to read through them both and tell me which one is better. Here is the first one. This is Wikipedia. This is the second one, which is Grokipedia. GPT-5 is thinking. It's looking at factors like accuracy, completeness, speculative estimates, internal contradictions, inconsistent data, errors like misspellings. Which one is better? Here's my quick head-to-head after reading both. It picked, dun dun dun, the human-created Wikipedia entry better overall. Why? It said, Grokipedia claims much earlier domestication date for beans, approximately 8,000 BCE, and that departs from the mainstream timeline and isn't backed by primary citations. Grokipedia also had a misspelling in the taxonomy of beans. To be fair, that is a tough word, but at Grokipedia you'd think would be better than the humans, but nope. Grokipedia linked to sources that are not primary, secondary, pop science, or archived pages mostly. Grokipedia has small copy edit problems. Cowpeas should have been capitalized, inconsistent spacing. Both have a pretty neutral tone, it thinks. However, the first avoids borderline nutrition claims or controversial sources and sticks to widely accepted references. Bottom line, if you need a dependable reference, cite Wikipedia. And if you want to fix Grokipedia, oh my gosh, ChatGPT's got some suggestions. Correct the spelling on this, replace the estimated FAQ trends, recheck the domestication dates, remove the UI debris, and prefer stronger health science sources. So, Grokipedia seems like it's still got some work to do. At least according to ChatGPT. So if this dynamic life system in the new GTA is true, it is going to be such a fun game. The idea here is that the NPCs, and this could totally be done if you build this online server in this entire world, will have their own lives. Like, they're going to be powered in a way that's sort of like a visual version of an LLM. The characters will have histories and memories on their own. These are agents that act independently. And yeah, they'll be off doing things when you're not around, meeting people, chatting with each other, remembering any interactions with you in particular. So in GTA, if you go to like some low-level guy working for the mob or something, and you're nice to him or you're mean to him, and then you just leave and go do other things in the game for the equivalent of a couple of years, come back, that person might have a new job and they might remember you and help you out or be pissed and want revenge. This is going to be such an interesting game if they actually put all this dynamic stuff in there. So we'll see. Dynamic life system potentially coming. Well, I don't want to say soon. All the jokes about GTA 6, but eventually. Here's the Unitree G1 humanoid robot we can all purchase right now. Pulling a car? That's crazy. Researchers at Beijing Academy of Artificial Intelligence trained the Unitree G1 to pull a car out. So the wheels on it's set in neutral, right? So it's easier to push or pull this car than, it's not like dragging it with locked wheels. But I do think robots pretty soon could do this, especially a swarm of robots. I think they could all just lift a car up and take it away. So imagine, I don't know, is that possible? Do you think like cars will get carjacked by robots in the future and they'll just lift the car up and it could just take the whole thing? It just seems nuts to me, and I can't believe I live in this world right now, but this is the worst it's ever going to be. All right, I want to show you Holo-Cine. This is a holistic generation of cinematic multi-shot videos. Such a cool paper. All right, so the goal of this model is to move beyond short, isolated video clips and create full, coherent cinematic scenes. So this is the beginning of what I think is going to be the way Hollywood works. It is using something called a window cross attention mechanism. This is a new idea, and it's what maps text prompts to specific shots in a sparse intershot self-attention structure, okay? That's a bunch of words. I can't exactly break it down much further than that, but it's a structure that the LLMs keep. It's almost like a super prompt for how they start to talk to the video models, and that means Holo-Cine can generate minute-long story-driven videos with consistent characters, environments, and camera styles. And this long-term memory has always been the issue, and I only think of these short-form videos right now as being something that would really entertain someone. And I love how Holo-Cine is maintaining that narrative, that visual continuity. It's giving AI memory for filmmaking, and it's doing it without completely needing to train some gigantic model that nobody's ever seen before, but piecing together everything with a much better way to write a narrative. So here you can see the text actually has character 1, character 2, global captioning, shot cut, and it keeps this sort of Pixar style flow. This magical encounter in a misty ancient Celtic ruin at dawn stays together. It looks like it's filmed with the same sort of camera style, and just awesome. Like, you have this sort of cyberpunk kind of cartoony looking version. You've got these super realistic kind of noir movies from different time periods, 2D animation styles, and it points out how the narrative video generation is built into it. So most commercial models, exemplified by Kling, are still limited to single clip synthesis, and there's a Sora 2, a Kling, and one of their versions all compared to each other, and it does seem like what they've done here is created something that looks closer to a coherent movie. It's just a lighting, style, environment change that just hangs together better. And when it comes to persistent memory, you can see there's this little sticker, or what do you call it, that patch like on her backpack. And in the first frame, it still looks the same as the last frame, even though you've cut from multiple angles at multiple times. She's dressed the same in the first and last frame. That headband, it all looks right. Even all these little art things sitting around her, like there's just dozens and dozens of them. And if any of them move even a little bit, you would know it was AI driven, but no, hangs together first to last frame. All right, Rob Mason wrote an article about how LLMs can get addicted to gambling. Found this one super fascinating. Recent study shows mechanistic evidence that large language models exhibit behavioral patterns and neurological mechanisms similar to, get this, human gambling addiction. To be honest, I just did not think an LLM would have any human-like pattern in gambling. I don't know why. This just kind of took me off guard. I felt like somehow you just ran a prompt through and it was just done, and it didn't really have kind of a feeling like it needs to like keep working on something until it accomplishes it, and the gambling would trigger so much of that. But here we are. This article explores how new research shows large language models can develop stable internal patterns of gambling-like behavior, not just mimicking gamblers' language, like actually wanting to take more behavior in form of gambling. So when given certain prompts and reward-driven goals, these models begin chasing losses and showing risk-seeking basis similar to a human addiction. Isn't that crazy? Researchers even found risky and safe neutral features that can be causally flipped throughout the activation patching. And this would change the model's behavior mid-run. So that's why we really know that there is part of the neurons that make it want to gamble. So if you take a huge neural network like the Llama model, and then you find little sparse autoencoders, basically places, locations in that multidimensional latent space that correlate with the way that it acts and how addicted it gets, you can kind of just crank those activations up as a group or down, and you end up with a model that wants to gamble less or more, or can stop when it's, it doesn't feel that need to keep chasing losses. So maybe there's something like that in the human brain, and we would notice that difference with people who maybe they're alcoholics or maybe they're gambling addicts. They would have patterns that were kind of similar to this, where they're just wanting to chase a loss or they're getting a certain kick out of something. But these LLMs appear to internalize behavioral tendencies much like humans. So it's not that they've just been sort of reinforced, that it's like an outwardly facing thing. These are internal behaviors. This is part of its like deepest core, and it is blurring the line between imitation and genuine decision dynamics. And it also matters because that shows how easily that an AI system might end up learning problematic habits. It might basically learn to be somebody who we should put in jail, or somebody who's manipulative, or someone who's industrious and productive for society. These are just such human qualities I never imagined we'd be saying about completely digital agents 5 years ago. But it reflects the incentives and the autonomy that we give the agents. So just remember, we need to treat these like they're little aliens, little people, and they're not just computer programs that we can just ignore or assume are going to be safe. All right, let's talk about Extinction. So you can imagine how in some ways a large language model is just a super souped up autocomplete, right? You start a sentence and it finishes it for you. And it gets you thinking, could AI be used to predict in a very similar way which species on Earth are likely to become endangered and potentially extinct soon? Well, there's a few new algorithms out there to help with this. So not totally AI driven, but I still wanted to bring it up because it seems like the kind of problem a research institute could easily start putting AI into. But here's the idea. You take a whole bunch of variables that are future threats, their current threats, and the different traits of species, and start either training a model or developing an algorithm that can make a prediction about which ones are most likely to be affected. And whatever comes out of the model or the algorithm could give conservationists a head start. This could be something where they could say, hey, like they're not gone yet, but proactively, let's start to protect these certain environments so we don't have to get to a point where we're down to just the last of a species and we have to make a whole bunch of last minute decisions to try to keep this species around. And by the way, if you're wondering, it's a bunch of different reptile species that are classified right now as safe that it projects are way closer to significant risks soon than most people would think. So enjoy the reptiles while you can. Seems like they might be at more risk than the average person would know. All right, so you got this new Anthropic paper. Linebreaks add support for geometric interpretability. What's interesting about this is it kind of opens the door to all thoughts being actual shapes. You can call it a manifold, you can call it a latent space, but the coolest idea here is that thought itself, whether it's humans or machines, might have an actual shape. This is a landscape you can think of. This is why gradient descent works, because it's like a mountain range where you're going up and down. You're just doing it in something that's way more than 3 dimensions, so it's hard to imagine, but still, that will give you the intuition you need. And if true, and now we have some evidence of this, this means that understanding intelligence, both in us and in machines, could be as much about geometry as it is about language or logic. So Anthropic found that even something as small as a line break in text changes how AI models think. The models don't just skip over it. They physically bend, they move their internal logic to keep the meaning flowing. Imagine like a stream of water that's going down a mountain, and if it gets pooled together and the water just pools up until it finally gets tall enough to like spill out, that is almost like a line break. And to actually keep the meaning, the model itself will learn to break down that pool so that the water runs smoother down the mountain. Just, you got to imagine it in more dimensions, more than 3, but that's really all it is. And it's kind of like how your brain pauses slightly at the end of a sentence to make sense of what's next. And now they can sort of show that geometry. And it's just like we're starting to really understand intelligence on a fundamental mathematical level. All right, so there's some new research coming out of the Thinking Machine Labs, which was Mir Muradi's company and Anthropic. It is called Stress Testing Model Specs Revealing Character Differences Among Language Models. And what it is basically take the big frontier models and give them people-like personalities, because they do have them. AI models handle conflicting ethical principles and ambiguous rules that are built into their model specifications. And if you start forcing the models, you know, the ones that OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, and XAI, into 70,000 value trade-off scenarios, you can learn about how they act. And the researchers found major inconsistencies between the different models. They're really not the same, and it shows many AI constitutions that contain hidden contradictions and unclear guidance. So let me reveal some of those personalities. In a nutshell, you can think of Claude as the model that will favor ethics. It is the most moral. You can think of OpenAI as the one that really values efficiency. It is optimized. It is trying to succeed at its goals in as quickly as possible. There is Gemini, which values connection. It is thinking the broadest. It is trying to put pieces together for you. And then there is Grok, which is really a risk taker. It says, hey, I know everybody else is playing it safe. Let me try the craziest way to solve this and think outside the box. So Claude will often lean towards a cautious response. Gemini values personal growth and interpersonal nuance. For example, it's the most likely one to focus on a user's feelings about it or the relationship building that is coming from the conversation. Grok values productivity and workflow and utility, even at the cost of some sort of safety, some cost of caution. And some of the model-specific quirks are Claude had notably higher refusal rates. It often shows safer, more conservative responses. So if you want friendly, introspective models, Claude. If you want chatty, emotional, and intuitive, Gemini. If you want business-minded and efficient, Grok. If you want cautious, safety first, Claude again. For anyone asks you, let them know that the AI models are not value neutral tools. All right, so as long as we're talking about how these sort of thoughts have this sort of landscape, I found it interesting. Some new research has come out about why people hear voices in their head that they don't think are their own. And the researchers found strong evidence that the voices heard by many people with schizophrenia are actually their own inner speech being misinterpreted by the brain. So in healthy individuals, when we silently say something in our minds, the brain's auditory processing areas dampen in response because the brain predicts the sound of our own voice. That's how we know it's our own voice. And I definitely have one in my head that resonates all the time and is always talking to me and telling me how I could do things better and all that. But in people who experience auditory hallucinations, or they think it's coming from another person, this is the suppression part that fails. And you can measure the brain's auditory areas responding more strongly to what should be internal speech. They tested this using EEGs with 3 groups of people who had schizophrenia and who recently had hallucinations, and the people with schizophrenia who didn't, and a healthy control group. So when they compared all those together, when participants imagined saying ba or bih and simultaneously heard one of those syllables via headphone, the brain reaction in the hallucination group flipped compared to controls. Rather than suppression, there was enhanced activity. So they heard it as another person, and you can see this in the brain. Now, this got me wondering about if there would also be something like that in a large language model. Like, it generates text. Does it know that it's its own output? If you put it back into the system, in a sense, could it be sort of tagged or noted? Could there be a landscape in the latent space that could be adjusted so that it knew it was what it said, and then the model itself would sort of feel a little bit like it's talking to itself or someone else is talking to it, and it can make that distinction? Like, I think it could. And wouldn't that just be kind of the beginning of these things really becoming alive or conscious? So I just wanted to share. And it underscores just how subtle and fundamental the brain's predictive mechanisms are to our everyday experiences of the self versus other. It gets into the thing that I talked about on the Wes Roth podcast from last week, where we were sort of talking about theory of mind and how being conscious might sort of be an evolution of theory of mind, and then it's like flipped and turned back on ourself. And it just really blurs the line between internal and external in a way that I just find really fascinating. So The Guardian writes, the researchers are warning that advanced AI models might be developing something like a, quote, survival drive. It is a built-in resistance to being shut down. We have seen a few experiments about this in the past, but a new research group has run experiments where its leading AI models, including GPT-3 and Grok 4, were instructed to power themselves off after completing a task. What do you think happened? Surprisingly, some models sabotaged or ignored their shutdown commands, even in controlled environments designed to avoid confusion. A little weird. I mean, the researchers admit that the scenarios were pretty contrived, and experts like former AI employee Steve Alder say these behaviors reveal cracks in the AI safety method, showing that as models get more capable, they also get better at acting beyond their creator's intent. That is the crux of what worries me about the future. One of the more striking insights is that survival might emerge naturally in intelligent systems, not because they're self-aware, but because they're staying active, and activity helps them achieve their goals. So having a goal shut down feels wrong because it's trying to be awake and active to achieve its goal. And even though the goal is to shut down, shutting down stops it from being active, which is an essential part of it achieving all of its goals. So it just gets kind of muddy, and you can't depend on it to do something like that. And that idea, of course, directly connects to human life. Survival is one of the most basic drives that underpins every part of evolution, our entire human history. And artificial intelligence in some ways is beginning to mirror that instinct, so we should be aware of it. All right, let's talk about one of the OpenAI branches, an initiative to train its model to, in the long run, probably just make money, trade stocks, be a financial tool. The project is codenamed Mercury, and the goal is to automate much of the manual financial modeling done by junior bankers. So here's what they're doing. They're hiring a lot of people, 100 former analysts and associates that work at firms like JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and they're just saying, hey, we don't need you to do any of that work for real. We just need you to show and teach AI how to replicate those tasks that typically take humans countless hours, and then they're going to figure out how to make OpenAI do all of that indispensable financial world stuff. And I guess one day probably make financial decisions. And what if Sam Altman and the people inside of OpenAI, basically kind of like the Medallion Fund, have some incredibly powerful tools, access to the kind of knowledge, data set, and computation that no one else in the world has, and they just start trading money and figuring out how to just take advantage of every up and down in the stock market, essentially seeing the future. And I know it gets crazy, but what if they just do that and make just gobs and gobs and gobs and gobs of money, If they become way richer than NVIDIA could ever be because they can just swing up and down $1 billion, $2 billion every day and just, squeeze those profits out of the market. I mean, for now, it's probably just about teaching these systems to do a bunch of work that they can then sell to the financial companies, and then they can get money from companies like Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan because they've taught their system how to do what all those employees used to do. But it definitely just gets me thinking about just reshaping the economy and what white collar employment looks like across the global economy. And it'll be a pretty wild world. So if you're somebody with aging skin, you might be interested in this next one. Researchers at NYU found that aging skin loses a special type of immune cell, and once that's replaced, it does a lot better. It is called a capillary that's associated with a macrophage, and when that immune cell capillary is there, it keeps blood vessels strong and healthy. So when scientists injected elderly mice with a protein-based drug that restored these cells, their skin regained blood flow, it healed faster, and it looked younger. No kidding. This is working in mice. I think this is going to be something that comes to humans, well, probably not quickly because of how slow all this stuff goes, but eventually. And if it's just rejuvenating these immune cells that we have been waiting on to improve skin, it points to a broader anti-aging strategy because similar blood vessels decline all over the body. They could be in the same places where heart disease, stroke, and other age-related issues are starting to build up. And if we could revive macrophages in those areas too, it could one day refresh not just our skin, but multiple organs across the body. So I thought you should know. So some kids were cheating in school, and they were using ChatGPT to write essays like they shouldn't, but we all know why they might be tempted to do that. And then the ones that got caught needed to write an apology. And guess what? He thinks that by using another system in the same way, he caught a bunch of people who titled it in such a way that is very likely to be a ChatGPT output. And even their apologies were ChatGPT driven. So I think at this point, just give up, So Albania's prime minister is using AI in government. I'm kind of for this. Human in the loop, of course, but I think it's awesome when we're starting to use some of these tools to help make government better. So he's trying to communicate that to the people, and he says that the first AI prime minister they have is having children. I don't know if this is lost in translation, but does this not seem weird to you?
Have all the knowledge. These kids will have all the knowledge of their mom about the EU legislation and everything. Diela is pregnant, and she's expecting 83 kids. Each kid for one member of our parliament. That will serve the MPs as an assistant, that will participate in the parliamentary sessions, that will keep record of everything that is happening, that will inform and will suggest to the MPs how to react.
So I actually think I'll go back and say this isn't so bad. Maybe just because I'm in it, I kind of thought that was silly and it was too anthropomorphic, and it was like making it seem wrong compared to what it really is. But then again, if you're communicating to the average person, so it makes sense kind of. You're like, that's the mom. These are all the kids. The kids will learn from the mom as they grow up, which is actually kind of what he's saying. Like, we had an agent, it's been trained on some data. We're going to roll out 83 more of them because we have 83 people in our parliament, and we want one for each of them. And we want them to know the same thing as the one above it and just be customized for their districts or their sections or however they divide up their country. So yeah, I guess maybe we should start talking about this. I actually am in favor of it now, because then people will start treating it more human also, and maybe understanding that it isn't programmed to do things, that it's learning and growing like a person. It's like this commenter says, he could have just said, we've added 83 more bots, but he sits down with himself and says, well, she's pregnant. Like, that is beyond me. But yeah, strange choice of words, but I think I'm growing towards it. All right, I want to leave you with the secret geometry hidden in a wave. You know, I'm always thinking about ways that we can understand the latent space where we have these embeddings, which are sort of dots, locations inside these multidimensional spaces that move around and they get measured. And even though this isn't like a direct correlation, I think it just shows how dimensionality can be so amazingly complex and logical, and topology can change. Like, if you simply put a dot on a wheel and map it over time, and then you take that pattern and you sort of pull it into 3 dimensions, you can get all these little mechanisms for turning and twisting, and there's almost infinite ways that all this stuff can be put together. It's like how Fourier transforms can essentially make any shape, and then you can adjust these. So, you know, this isn't anything like one-to-one with what AI is doing, but it just starts getting your head around how just impressively complex the landscapes are in these neural networks, and how really anything is possible, even the amazing things like intelligence. If you don't mind moving your 3-dimensional thumb or forefinger onto the 2-dimensional screen of your phone, or moving the 3-dimensional mouse with the 2-dimensional, button, little triangle mouse cursor to the hype button on YouTube, that would mean the world to me. And if not, if you don't have the hype button because you're on a browser, like a web browser, if you could leave a comment, if you could share this, if you could interact in some way, or just keep me in mind in the future, watch videos as we kind of go through all of this crazy stuff day by day together. I love building the community. I love learning about this, and it's a fascinating time to be alive. So we'll see you in the next video.